There are a lot of UFC fighters with very tragic, sad, or inspiring backstories, and today we are going to take a look at some of these UFC fighters and rank their backstories based on how much they make me cry or, just inspired to run a fucking marathon after I hear their backstories, right? So let me also get into this by saying we will not be including women fighters, so if you're looking for Ronda Rousey's backstory, I'm afraid she will not be in this video, man. You might need to look at a different channel. But also, we won't be including the old heads. So if you're looking for Randy Couture's backstory, he's not going to be in this one. The only old heads I would consider adding to this is maybe Nick Diaz or Daniel Cormier. Obviously, DC has an S tier backstory. But let me move on to the actual real fighters now. So let's start off with Charles Oliveira, the favela man himself. I'm going to put him in the A tier, okay? Now, Charles does have a pretty tragic but inspiring backstory. Obviously, he was diagnosed. Also, let me say this. The facts in this video are not 100% correct. Do not quote me on any of this. This is just based on my memory. Okay, I did not watch a fucking 3-hour-long documentary on Charles before making this video. So I'm just it's gonna give like the spark notes of what I remember and how I think his backstory is, right? So from what I remember, he did grow up wanting to be a soccer player, a football player, and he was diagnosed with some sort of disease, some sort of bone disease, was it, or something, and the doctors told him he was never going to be able to play football. He might not even be able to walk, or something of that sort. And Charles got into jiu-jitsu at a very young age. I remember he got into jiu-jitsu, and he made his way out the favelas, right? This guy grew up in the favelas, so that already makes him an A-tier backstory, right? You are guaranteed to be in the A-tier or the B-tier if you were, grew up in the favelas, right? And so, he got to the UFC. He was a bit of a quitter, right? We always hear that. Charles Oliveira was a bit of a quitter. He was losing to these guys, tapping out because his shoulder got hurt. And he was quitting, right? And then he got his daughter, man. And that's when he went on a tear, man. He gave birth to his daughter. He himself gave birth to his daughter. And he went on a fucking tear, became the champ, obviously is loved by many, and became the man himself, became fucking Charles the Bronx Oliveira, motherfuckers. And I have to put him in the A tier, okay? This guy has a very good backstory. I recommend you do watch a fucking documentary on it instead of listening to my little 2-minute explanation. But I have to keep these explanations short, guys. I can't go in depth and make this video fucking 3 hours long. So let's move on to Jiri Prochazka. Jiri Prochazka, I'm going to put him in the C tier, man, because this guy has he has a cool backstory. We do have to say he has a cool backstory, but it's not on the level of some guy growing up in the fucking slums and making his way out. Whereas, Jiri Prochazka, he grew up in a cool little Czech Republic neighborhood, right? And man, this guy, he was a menace as a child, right? We always hear Jiri was like a bad kid as a child. He was getting into fights, right? He was getting into a little bit of fights, and that's when he picked up MMA, and he started really channeling his anger and his energy into MMA. And then obviously he moved to Japan and he started practicing the Bushido samurai code, and that's where he really developed his samurai personality, because we look at Jiri as this modern day samurai where he's in the octagon doing these fucking samurai moves, and obviously one of the most entertaining fighters in the UFC because of the samurai spirit that he has. Whether it's his personality or his fight style, he is fucking entertaining, and his backstory adds to that. So I'm not going to put him too high just because he doesn't have necessarily the most inspiring backstory. But, to see a kid who grew up kind of like a bit of a menace, and then he became this very strict samurai who obeys rules and sits in the dark for fucking 3 years, he is C tier. He's a cool ass guy, and he has a cool backstory, in my opinion, right? Let's move on to Israel Adesanya. Izzy is going to go in the D tier, I am afraid. That is our lowest tier here. And the reason I'm putting him in the D tier is because, this guy, he did grow up in Nigeria. Fair enough, he did. He was born in Nigeria, I should say. But he grew up upper middle class, okay? It's not the most tragic backstory. It's not the most inspiring necessarily. He did have some servants, and, he had a mom and a dad who were working good jobs. His dad was an accountant, and they moved to New Zealand to make more money as an accountant, right? There were better conditions in New Zealand, so he moved to New Zealand, and that's where, he got bullied as a kid a little, but he became a badass UFC guy, right? And so, fair enough, that could boost him a little, but I'm going to keep him in the D tier compared to some of these other guys we're going to see. I don't think he has the most tragic backstory, or even necessarily the most interesting backstory. You know, fair enough, I could see if you're from Nigeria or if you are African, you could look up to this guy and you could say maybe like, you know, no, he's a cool guy. I look up to him. I very much do look up to him. But just looking at it from the outside perspective, he necessarily isn't as on the same level of some of these other guys. So I'm going to put him at the D tier, right? And let's move on to a perfect example of somebody from Africa that actually has an insane backstory. Francis Ngannou. I know he's not in the UFC anymore, but he is still an active fighter, and I'm gonna put him in the S tier because his story is so fucking good that he has to be in the S tier, right? We've heard the stories of him working in the fucking sand mines in Cameroon, and what was it? I can't remember exactly now, but we've all heard it on Joe Rogan, right? He fucking had to leave Cameroon to find an opportunity, right? And he had to hike across the desert. I think he was in fucking Morocco, and he had to cross the fucking seas or some shit on like a raft or some crazy ass story. I'm probably over exaggerating, but it is genuinely a movie story. It sounds like a movie when he fucking explains it, and it is a very inspiring story to hear about this guy. He fucking gets to France, right? He fucking starts training extremely late in his career, right? He started training very late, and he makes it to the fucking UFC and becomes a champion. And obviously he still is going through tragedies like his son passing away, but he pushes through that, and that's why I look at Francis Ngannou and I see a very tough man, very inspiring to see what he came from and what he has managed to do, you know, he's basically on top of the world regardless of, you know, very sad situations that have been going on around him. But dude, I'm telling you, man, if you're in the A tier or the S tier, I have shed a tier because of your backstory. And man, Francis Ngannou does have a very sad backstory. I've seen, you know, when I see the edits on TikTok, I do shed a tear, man. I'm not kidding. I do shed a tear because of his backstories, man. It's just, it's very sad. I do recommend, there are probably several YouTube documentaries on it, and I think we've all heard, like, the Joe Rogan stories that he's told us and shit on Joe Rogan, but, dude, he does have probably the best backstory in UFC history, you know, so I'm gonna toss him in the S tier, okay? Terrance McKinney. Now, Terrance McKinney, I did not know about his backstory until recently. I'm gonna put him C tier. I'll put him just like above Jiri Prochazka. This isn't really necessarily the order, but I'm gonna put him in the C tier, right? So, Terrance McKinney was he was a troublemaker, bit of a troublemaker. He was on drugs as well. This one night, he was on drugs, right? He was on fucking mixing a bunch of drugs, and the police caught him fucking. There's literally body cam footage of it. He's on a fence, acting fucking insane, out of his mind. The police tried to calm him down and get him, just get him under fucking control. They had to shock him and tase him because he was fucking out of his mind. They tased this motherfucker. He tanks the shots. He's literally being tased and tanking the shots. And then he literally had to get put in a fucking ambulance. And his heart stopped in the ambulance. I'm pretty sure it stopped in the ambulance or when he got to the hospital or something. It stopped 2 times. So he technically died twice. And that's when he realized, you know, when they fucking resurrected him, right? When they shocked him back to life or whatever. That's when he realized that I got to make a fucking change in my life, man. I can't be this fucking hood rat. That's not offensive, okay? He was genuinely like a hood rat, right? And he had to change his ways, man. He had to fucking come to the light and, you know, start channeling his energy kind of similarly to Jiri Prochazka. Obviously, it's a more insane story than Jiri Prochazka's because he did fucking die, literally. But, man, I mean, it's cool to see the way he went to MMA. Obviously, he's not the best fucking UFC fighter, but that doesn't take away from his backstory. His backstory is what I really care about, and it's inspiring. And I didn't even know about it until like a month ago when I saw a cool little TikTok edit on it, but it's cool. I definitely recommend you guys look it up real quick. There is like I said, there's the footage of him getting fucking shocked and basically dying on that night, and he got resurrected or fucking whatever, but it's a cool ass story that I did not know about, especially a guy like Terrance McKinney, who I feel like most of us just fucking shuck off as this guy who gets chinned, or he gets chinned in the goofiest ways, but I don't know, man, he's a C tier backstory in my opinion, right? So let's move on to the next guy. Alright, so next up we got Marlon Chito Vera. I'm going to put Chito in the A tier. Now, obviously, I know his backstory very well because he is my favorite fighter, but I'm going to sum it up. So, obviously, he grew up in Ecuador, very poor area of Ecuador, and he was fucking fighting in the streets as a kid, you know, kind of similar to Jiri Prochazka, but his brothers, I'm pretty sure, made him fucking fight these kids in the fucking street, and so he was like a street fighter. He was a bit of a street fighter, which is kind of what his style is now, even, and he meets his wife at 8 years old or 9 years old, and he's a street fighter out here. He realizes, I gotta fucking make money, and I think the way I want to make money is by fucking fighting, right? That's the only thing I like to do. And so he knows he's not the most skilled guy, right? His people are telling him at the gym, he's not the most skilled guy. I recommend you fucking quit. And he's like, fuck that, bro. This is the only thing I want to do. So even though I'm not the most skilled guy at it, I'm gonna fucking push through, work hard, and try my best, right? And so he knows this is the only thing I want to do. Eventually, he's like 18 years old, I'm pretty sure, some shit, and he's at the point where his dad's saying, you gotta fucking come work on the farm with me or whatever if you don't make it as a fighter. And he's fighting in these underground promotions with fucking metal fences that are, these sharp-ass fucking homemade fences, like street beef style. And eventually, he gets the call from the UFC saying, hey, we want to have you on Tough, right? He's on Tough. He goes on a fucking Tough. He wins his fight, and he's in an impressive fashion, right? Dana sees him. He's like, damn, who is this kid, right? And then, sadly, he gets some sort of, I think it's like chicken pox or something, and he has to get off of Tough, right? They fucking seclude him from Tough, but Dana says, hey, I'm going to give you another chance because it's not your fault that you got fucking chicken pox. And throughout the whole show, he is, I'm yapping for so long, but it's because I love Chito, man. I got to give his backstory properly, okay? So he's on Tough, right? And throughout the whole thing, his story is that he wants to pay for his daughter's surgery. Obviously, we all know his daughter has a condition, if you've seen her. And it's also a very sad story because his wife almost died during giving birth to his daughter, right? And his daughter almost died as well. So it was a very sad story. And they were only like 18 years old when she was born. And so he wanted to provide for his daughter. That's why he fights. And so he's fucking on Tough, right? And he gets kicked off because of the chicken pox. But he gets to come back on. He wins his fight. Gets into the fucking UFC. Obviously, there's that picture or the video of him crying when he's going into the octagon. And from there on, he fucking becomes a fighter, man. And this guy moves his family to California, fucking he's a very family man. I fucking love Chito, man. I don't want to yap about him too long, but he does have a very good backstory. I recommend you guys watch it, especially if you guys are one of these fucking Chito haters who thinks he's like, bro, he's so cocky or some shit like that. No, he's a good person. He is a very good person. Trust me. The reason I got into liking Chito Vera is because I heard his backstory and I realized this guy is a fucking cool ass man. Okay, so I love Chito. I'm putting him in the A tier. It is a well-deserved spot. If you don't believe me, watch his fucking backstory. Okay, let's move on to the next guy, Khalil Rountree. Oh, bro, I think I'll put Khalil Rountree in the A tier as well because Khalil, he does have a pretty cool backstory where he was a fat guy. His dad got killed when he was very young. I'm pretty sure his dad was like a record label manager or some shit, but he was getting involved with like the wrong guys, and he got fucking shot. And Khalil was this fat guy. He was a pretty fat, and we've all seen he weighed like 300 pounds, and we've heard him crying on Joe Rogan, talking about men's mental health, which is cool. It's cool to see. And he realized he needs to make a fucking change. This motherfucker lost obviously like 100 plus pounds, and now he's in the UFC fighting for a belt. I don't know, he might not the best fighter, but you don't have to be the best fighter to have a good ass backstory. And I think Khalil Rountree has a pretty good backstory. Granted, I'm not fucking invested in it too much to the point where I could describe every detail, but I just know, his dad died, he was fat, and he lost weight. And it sounds like a pretty cool backstory, right? Maybe it's not, maybe it's like B tier, but I'm going to keep it at the A tier for now, because let's move on to Alexander Volkanovski. I'll put him in the C tier as well. Volk was, actually, fuck it. I'm going to move McKinney up to the B tier just because he did die and he literally came back from death. So I'll put him in the B tier. But Volk is going in the C tier with Jiri, because Volk, obviously we all know he started training very late into life. It was like, well, not very late, but like 22, which is pretty late for a UFC fighter who became a fucking champ, the featherweight GOAT. And so he was a rugby player. He literally weighed like 200 something pounds at one point playing rugby. And he realized, I want to make a change in my life. I think I'm going to become, with some of the wrestling experience that he had in the past, I think I'm going to become an MMA fighter. And he started training MMA. And he's always had this like David versus Goliath situation in his fights where he is the smaller guy. So it's kind of cool to see, the short guy who's typically the underdog do so well in his fights and become the featherweight GOAT. So that's the reason I have him in the C tier. Obviously he didn't grow up in the fucking slums, but he did have a cool little backstory, training late and reaching the heights that he has reached. So I think C tier is well deserved for Alexander Volkanovski, okay? Let's move on to Leon Rocky Edwards. Bro, I'm going to have so many people in the A tier. I'll put Leon in the A tier, though, too. Leon has that. Obviously, we all know born in the zinc roof in Jamaica or whatever. But fucking yeah, he was born in Jamaica, moved to the UK. I'm guessing I don't know Leon's full story. I haven't heard it in a fucking while now. But I just remember that this guy's dad did get involved into some bad activities, some gang activities. But people do what they need to do. Obviously, he went down the wrong path. But you can't fucking hate on him for that necessarily, especially because he did get shot. He fucking died. He got, well, I don't know. In England, he might have got fucking stabbed, but I know he got killed. I'm pretty sure he got shot. And it was a very sad call that came, that reached Leon's home. And his mom got the call in the middle of the night that his dad had been shot. Leon's dad has been shot. And Leon had to hear that at like 12 years old, which no fucking kid should have to hear that their dad's been fucking shot, regardless of what their job is, even if they're a gang member. And so Leon was also he was a bit of a road man, right? He was a bit of a bad kid growing up, a bit of a menace growing up, and he was going down the wrong path. But then he realized he walked into an MMA gym that I'm pretty sure his mom brought him to the MMA gym, and he realized, fuck, I could do this instead. Instead of beating people up in the fucking street and doing this stupid shit, I could put this towards something good. And man, he did put it towards something good, and he became the champ. And he had that speech when he fucking won the belt that was very sad and made me tear up, man. That's a very inspirational speech, hearing where he came from, hearing what he's accomplished, how he was doubted his whole life. And man, it did make me shed a tear. Actually, fuck this, I'm putting Khalil Rountree in the B tier because he didn't make me shed a tear over his story. And I did say that earlier, didn't I? I said that if I have not cried or shed a tear over your story, you're not in the fucking A tier or S tier. So I'm sorry, Khalil, you're not in the A tier, bro. I'm very sorry, but even though your dad did die, but I'm sorry, he's gonna be in the B tier. Let's move on to Max Holloway. I'm going to put Max Holloway in the B tier. He did grow up in a bad area of Hawaii. His parents were drug addicts. I think it was both his parents. It might have just been his mom, but I know they were like fucking heavy drug users, like heroin and shit, I'm pretty sure. And he grew up in an area where most people were not fucking successful. He said himself, like, he knew kids that were more athletic than him and better than him at certain fucking things like football and shit and stuff like that. Even better fighters than him maybe, but they didn't make it out of the area, man, because that area where he was born in Hawaii was doomed for fucking failure. You were doomed for failure if you were born there. So this motherfucker was born in a bad area, and he grinded his way to the UFC despite his fucking parents being drug addicts. And it's cool to see what Max Holloway has accomplished and literally growing up in the UFC as well. We've been like following his journey since the beginning. This motherfucker has that insane cool speech, in my opinion. It's cool to see like a fucking young Max saying like, you gotta try, man, you're a fucking loser if you don't try. So I like Max. I think he has a cool inspirational story, and obviously seeing him get the belt and all that shit, it's very inspiring. Fair enough, he might be C tier, but in my opinion he's B tier, because he did have to struggle more than guys like fucking Jiri, Volk, and Izzy. So I'm gonna put him in the B tier. Let's move on to Jon Bones Jones, S tier. No, I'm joking. He's fucking D tier, in my opinion, okay? This guy did not grow up in the fucking hood. He didn't grow up in the fucking projects, despite what he might have you think, but he did not. I'm telling you right now, he did not. He grew up in fucking Rochester, New York. He grew up with his brothers who are NFL players. And, fair enough, you've seen maybe when you're watching a Jon Jones documentary, you saw like, oh, but no, he had to start fighting because he got his wife pregnant or some shit. I'm pretty sure that's like his story. That's the most tragedy he's gone through, is not having a job and having to start fighting because he got his girlfriend pregnant or some shit. So, fair enough, he just had to become a fighter like every other guy on here, but, I mean, that's not enough to put you anywhere other than the D tier. So, Jon Jones is in the D tier. That's just objectively true, though, because, I mean, what the fuck has John had to go through necessarily? And he also beats his wife, but I'm not even considering that shit, all the terrible shit he's done. His story just isn't inspiring. Becoming the GOAT, okay? Becoming the GOAT, that's your fucking story? Okay, good, that's it. But, yeah, anyway, let me move on. I'm gonna put Ilia Topuria in the C tier. Now, Ilia, his story really, it's kind of cool because, he did have to escape from war and shit. His parents were in Georgia, and they were pregnant at the time. His mom was pregnant with Ilia's brother, and it was at a time when Russia, I'm pretty sure, was invading Georgia, and they were just killing people. They were literally killing Georgians. It was like 450 Georgians. There's a video that I watched on this. They killed like 450 Georgians, and Ilia's mother and dad would have been one of those people who died, most likely, if they did not leave when they did, because they left for the capital of Georgia, and from there they went to Germany, which is why Ilia was born in Germany, which is, you know, you get the, bro, where the fuck even is this guy from, bro? Motherfucker, he had to escape war, so obviously he can't necessarily be fucking born in Georgia, but he did later on live in Georgia for a bit. And then he moved to Spain, and that's where he became a fighter, right? He literally fucking dropped out at like 15 and just dedicated his life to fighting. So obviously not the most tragic backstory, but still having to escape war and fucking moving your whole life because of a war is, you know, it's pretty, we gotta put it up there, man. So not obviously with the B tier guys, but C tier, just a little cool little fact if you didn't know about Ilia. So yeah, we'll put him in the C tier. And last but not least, I got Alex Pereira. I'm going to toss Alex in the... See, you guys are going to say A tier, but I think B tier. I know he has an inspiring backstory, but I think it's on the same level as these guys in the B tier. Maybe, the only guy who maybe shouldn't be in the B tier is Terrance McKinney, now that I think about it, but I don't know, really. I don't know. I think Alex is... All right, here, I'll say this. Alex is at the top of B tier. How do I put him there? Alex is right between A and B tier. Fair enough, he did grow up in the favelas. That is a very hard situation to get out of. But, you know, he was an alcoholic, but that's kind of the extent to it. He was an alcoholic working at a tire shop, obviously, so that's pretty cool that he made it out of that. But other than that, man, I don't, unless I'm missing something completely right now. Tell me if I'm fucking missing something completely where his dad and mom both fucking died and he was an orphan. But I'm pretty sure he was just like a normal guy he was an alcoholic, and he like fucking went to rehab or some shit. He obviously didn't go to rehab, but he just stopped becoming an alcoholic and he fucking got into fighting instead. You know, it's a cool backstory, but it's not on the level of the guys who have made me fucking cry because I've heard their backstories and shit. So I'm gonna have Alex in the B tier. I know if he's your favorite fighter, you're gonna say S tier, easily S tier, bro. You're completely wrong, but I think he's like B tier, top of B tier. Granted, because he was in the favelas, and he obviously has accomplished so much, becoming literally the combat sports GOAT, pretty much, with kickboxing and fucking MMA. But for now, I'll have him at the top of B tier. Also, let me adjust this. If we're going to do this properly, it should be like this. It should be like this, realistically. So this is like the realistic order right here. But yeah, that's it for the video, guys. Sorry again that I didn't fucking go an hour into everybody's backstory, but I tried the best I could do with like the time that I have. I don't want to make this video fucking 3 hours long. And yeah, let me know if I missed out on any guys or if I left out like some details that are very important about these guys. It's hard to make a video like this if I don't have a fucking entire script in front of me, but I don't want to do that shit. So yeah, anyway, I do recommend you guys watch some of these guys' backstories as well, especially the guys in like the A and S tier. Obviously, I'm pretty sure we've all heard Ngannou's story, but yeah, I mean, that's it for the video. I do hope you guys enjoy this. Let me know in the comments if you guys like this or if I'm a fucking stupid bitch and I should have put these guys in the complete reverse order. But yeah, that's it for the video. I'll see you guys in the next one, and peace.